There is a quiet moment that happens when someone's eyes meet yours. A moment that feels almost like the world pauses just long enough for you to question everything you believe about yourself. Perhaps you've felt it too, that rush in your chest when a man looks at you. And for a second, you wonder if this might be the moment your heart has been waiting for. You can sense the echo of all the years you've spent longing to be seen, truly seen, beneath all the masks and the silent compromises. Louise once said, "Every thought we think is creating our future." And it's so easy to forget that this also applies to the story you tell yourself when someone's gaze lands on you. The story that maybe, finally, you are worthy, that maybe the emptiness you've carried will dissolve under the warmth of someone else's attention. Sometimes, what you feel in that gaze isn't even about the man in front of you. It's about all the old memories that come flooding back in a single heartbeat. The nights you lay awake, wondering if you were ever enough for someone to stay. The mornings when you looked in the mirror and questioned if your softness was a flaw or a gift. There is a strange kind of vulnerability in allowing yourself to be witnessed, to be felt, to be imagined in someone's eyes. Brené Brown calls this place the birthplace of connection and the path to worthiness. But she also reminds us that vulnerability is never comfortable. It is the most honest thing we have, and it will ask us to sit with the truth we'd rather turn away from. When a man looks at you and something stirs deep inside your chest, it can feel like recognition, like the universe finally sending you a sign that you are lovable, that you are chosen, that you will not have to carry your loneliness one more day. And yet, sometimes what you think is love is only a mirror held up to the parts of you still aching to be healed. The longing that flares up in your body, the quiet hope that this time will be different. It all comes from places you may have forgotten were still tender. The look in his eyes might feel sacred, and maybe it is, but sacred doesn't always mean safe. Sacred simply means it has the power to awaken what you've buried. And maybe you've noticed that when someone's gaze feels too familiar, too consuming, it's because it touches something ancient in you. It can be the echo of your childhood hunger to be approved of, to be chosen, to be told that you matter beyond what you can give. The eyes you meet are sometimes the reflection of the eyes you have closed inside yourself. The ones that learned early on to search for love in other people's acceptance. The ones that still scan every room for someone to confirm that you deserve to take up space. But a look, no matter how intense, does not have the power to define your worth. Even if your heart tries to convince you otherwise, even if the softness in his eyes feels like the answer to every prayer you've whispered into your pillow, that is the moment to pause, to breathe, to ask yourself whether what you see in him is real, or just a projection of your own longing to belong. Because sometimes, what you think is destiny is simply an old pattern wearing a different face. And yet, there is no shame in this. No shame in wanting to be seen, to be loved, to be chosen. Every woman carries this longing somewhere in her bones. It is part of what makes you beautifully human. It is part of what connects you to every other heart that has ever ached for the same tenderness. But as you listen to this, I want you to know that even if his eyes never look your way again, you are still worthy. Even if the moment passes and he turns away, your light has not dimmed. When you begin to understand that, when you begin to feel that your value does not rise and fall with someone's attention, something in you softens. You stop grasping. You stop performing. You stop believing that you need to be anyone other than who you are to deserve the kind of love that stays. And that, more than any fleeting gaze, is the beginning of a different kind of freedom. Sometimes, what you feel when his eyes meet yours is a hunger you can't quite name. It's that small, quivering hope that this time, finally, someone will choose you in all the ways you've waited to be chosen. There's an ache under your ribs that whispers, maybe he sees me the way I've always needed to be seen. And so, your heart latches onto every tiny sign, every lingering glance, every fleeting smile, as if it were proof that you are no longer invisible. It's almost as if your body remembers the years of being overlooked, of being someone's second thought, and it wants so badly to believe that this moment will make all the others disappear. But when you slow down enough to notice, you might realize that what you feel is not always about him. Sometimes it is the residue of old disappointments, old abandonments, old stories that have followed you into every room and every relationship. When a man looks at you in that way, like you are the only woman in the world, it can feel intoxicating. It can feel like you are finally enough. But longing has a way of dressing up as destiny. It slips into your heart quietly, wrapping itself around your thoughts until you can't tell the difference between genuine connection and the familiar ache of needing to be wanted. It's tender to admit that you might be reading into something that isn't truly there. It feels almost humiliating, doesn't it? To realize that you have handed over your sense of worth to the first person who seems to notice the softness in you. But there is no shame in craving love. There is no shame in wanting to be held in someone's regard as something precious. This is what it means to be human, to be wired for belonging, to hunger for the warmth of another's presence. Still, it is in these moments of quiet honesty that you begin to see how easily the heart can confuse recognition with love. You might have learned long ago to interpret every small kindness as proof that you were finally safe. Perhaps you grew up needing to scan every face, every tone, every gesture, trying to decipher whether you were accepted or rejected. And now, even as a grown woman, there is still a part of you that holds her breath whenever someone seems to look past your surface. The part that silently pleads, "Please let this be real. Please let this be the one who stays." But love is not something you discover in someone else's gaze. Love is something you grow inside yourself, quietly, patiently, even when no one is watching. Louise Hay's words come back to you like a soft reassurance. I do not fix problems. I fix my thinking. Then problems fix themselves. You see, no amount of longing will ever make someone more capable of loving you in the way you deserve. No amount of analyzing the way he looked at you will change the truth of who he is or how willing he is to meet you where you are. And so, the question gently unfolds inside your chest. Do you want him, or do you want the story you've written about him? Are you in love with who he really is, or are you in love with the possibility of finally feeling chosen? This is not an accusation. This is not a criticism. It is an invitation to pause, to breathe, to wonder whether the craving you feel is truly about him at all. Because sometimes, what you are longing for is the feeling of finally belonging to yourself. There is a quiet agreement that often forms in these moments, even if no words are spoken. It's an unspoken contract your heart drafts in secret, the one that says, if he keeps looking at me like this, I will finally feel whole. It doesn't matter how many times you have promised yourself you would never fall into that old pattern again. When his gaze feels warm enough to melt the loneliness that has stiffened inside you, it can feel almost impossible not to surrender to the fantasy. You might find yourself imagining a future that hasn't even begun, painting a picture of a love that will finally soothe every hidden ache you've carried. But in the gentle space of reflection, you can start to sense that this is not a love story. It is a story about longing, about the way your spirit reaches for comfort in places that cannot offer it, about the way you learn to believe that another person's attention is the medicine for your own emptiness. And this is where the illusion becomes so dangerous, because it feels safer to believe that someone else can heal you than to admit that you are the one who must return to yourself. It feels easier to place the burden of your peace in someone else's hands than to face the quiet work of learning to belong to your own heart. There is a moment when you close your eyes, and for the first time, you ask yourself the question you've been avoiding. What am I really trying to feel through him? Is it safety? Is it validation? Is it proof that you are still desirable, still worthy, still alive in a world that sometimes makes you feel invisible? No one can answer this but you. No one can untangle this longing but the part of you that remembers what it felt like to be small and unseen. And maybe this is where something shifts. When you stop searching for rescue and begin to wonder what it would mean to become the sanctuary you've always sought in others, the heart will do anything to avoid emptiness. It will write stories, attach meanings, cling to illusions, anything to avoid the quiet truth that love cannot be borrowed. And yet, in that space between the need and the fulfillment, something essential is waiting, a kind of knowing that no gaze, no matter how tender, can complete what was never truly broken in you, a kind of freedom that comes only when you no longer need someone else's eyes to remember your own worth. This is the beginning of a different conversation with yourself, one where you do not rush to fill the silence with fantasies, one where you learn to sit with the ache without believing it means you are unlovable. It is a quiet revolution, the moment you realize you can be seen without being saved, that you can be wanted without losing yourself, that you can be cherished without making someone else the keeper of your wholeness. If you feel a soft trembling in your chest right now, It's because some part of you already knows this is true, that no one is coming to complete you, that you were always meant to return to your own heart first. And when you finally begin to trust that, something in you will stop begging for permission to exist. Something in you will remember that you are already enough. There's a quiet beauty in learning to recognize the difference between a gaze that nourishes and a gaze that consumes. Sometimes, when a man looks at you with presence so gentle it feels almost sacred, something in you softens without fear. You feel your body exhale, as if it has finally been given permission to rest. This kind of attention does not feel like a test or a performance. It feels like a tender witnessing, like someone is simply honoring your existence without asking you to be more or less than you are. And perhaps you have not felt this often enough to trust it, but when it comes, you will know. Because genuine presence never demands. It does not rush. It does not hide cruelty behind charm. It arrives quietly, steady as morning light, and you do not have to lose yourself to feel its warmth. In these moments, it helps to remember that real connection feels safe in your nervous system. Your breath stays soft. Your chest does not tighten with dread. You do not feel the need to guess what he wants or mold yourself into someone more palatable. There is no secret contract being written, no hidden agenda humming beneath the surface. Just two souls meeting in a space where neither has to prove anything. You may have grown so used to the volatility of conditional affection that this steadiness feels almost unfamiliar. But it is worth noticing that the right kind of gaze never burns. It illuminates. It does not set fire to your boundaries or ask you to betray yourself. A loving gaze is like sunlight on your skin, warm, never burning. It holds no threat of disappearing if you stop performing. It does not require you to shrink or swell to stay desirable. And perhaps the most radical thing you can do is allow yourself to receive it without suspicion. To let someone see you without immediately wondering when they will turn away. Because it is in that quiet acceptance that you begin to rewire the old stories that taught you love was something you had to earn. But there is also a softer truth here, one that can be harder to face. Sometimes you have mistaken intensity for love simply because it was all you knew. Sometimes a look that seemed so consuming was never about connection. It was about control. And it takes a different kind of courage to admit that desire can be a disguise for power. That sometimes when a man's gaze feels too much, it is because he is testing the edges of your self-worth to see how far you will bend. This is not about blame. It is about clarity. Because when you can discern the difference between a gaze that honors you and a gaze that tries to own you, you reclaim something precious, your own capacity to choose what you allow into your heart. And in that choosing, you begin to understand that not every man who sees you deserves to keep looking. There is a subtle kind of gaze that does not feel like an embrace at all. Instead, it feels like a test you didn't agree to take. You may have felt it before, the way some men look at you as if they are measuring what they can get away with. It is not admiration but calculation, not warmth, but a silent probing for your weak spots. And it can be so disorienting because it sometimes arrives wrapped in flirtation or praise. It can look like interest, like desire, even like affection. But beneath the surface, it is something colder, a way of seeing you that is less about connection and more about conquest. When this happens, there is often a familiar tightening inside your body. Maybe it starts as a heaviness in your chest, a slight ache in your throat, a sudden pressure behind your eyes. Your intuition knows before your mind can find the words. Something is not safe here. Something is not genuine. But because you have been taught to second-guess yourself, you may dismiss that knowing as paranoia. You tell yourself you are overreacting, that you should be grateful for the attention, that being wanted is better than being alone, and so you stay. You smile. You pretend that this feeling is excitement when it is really a quiet alarm ringing through your nervous system. It takes a different kind of self-respect to name this for what it is, a gaze that seeks to control, a gaze that tries to make you small enough to fit inside someone else's hunger. There is no shame in having craved this attention, no shame in having believed, even for a moment, that this was love. Because when you have been lonely long enough, even manipulation can look like tenderness. Even domination can look like devotion. But there is a softer path waiting for you when you decide to trust what your body has always known. Louise Hay's words can become an anchor in that moment. I am willing to release the need to be unworthy. You see, the reason some men stare at you in that hollow, possessive way is not because you are lacking. It is because your light unsettles something in them. It is because your openness is an invitation they do not know how to meet with the same sincerity, and so they try to claim it instead of honoring it. There is nothing romantic about a gaze that wants to own you, nothing sacred about attention that costs you your peace. And when you allow yourself to see this clearly, you begin to feel a new kind of power awakening in your chest. The power that says, I do not have to accept every pair of eyes that lands on me. The power that says, my worth is not determined by how many men want to claim me. The power that knows being desired is not the same as being valued. There comes a tender moment, often after you have learned the difference between feeling chosen and feeling controlled, when you begin to notice how much of your identity you have placed inside someone else's gaze. It can be startling to realize how much power you have handed over without ever intending to. And when you catch yourself waiting for his eyes to find you, to reassure you, to remind you that you are worthy of being here, you might feel a quiet ache that is older than this relationship, older than any man you have ever loved. It is in these moments that something in you starts to remember that your worth is not up for negotiation, that your belonging is not dependent on whether or not he sees you today. And yet, there is a tenderness in admitting how human it feels to crave that confirmation, to want someone else to mirror back the beauty you sometimes struggle to see in yourself. You are not weak for wanting to be seen. You are not foolish for feeling the pull of validation. You are simply a heart that has spent too long believing it had to earn love by performing. And when you realize you have been reacting to every flicker of his attention, every moment his eyes turn toward or away from you, it can feel as though you have lost yourself in 1,000 tiny ways. But the truth is, you have never disappeared. You have only been waiting beneath the surface, hoping for permission to come home to yourself. There is a different kind of peace that arrives when you understand that no one else holds the keys to your worthiness, that no matter how many times you have given your power away, you can always call it back. There was a woman who once believed that every time a man looked at her, it was a test she had to pass. She spent years trying to decipher the hidden meanings behind every glance, every silence, every gesture, and for a long time, she believed that if she could just be perfect enough, he would finally offer her the safety she had been craving. But the safety never came. Because safety that depends on someone else's approval is not safety at all. It is a fragile illusion that breaks the moment you stop performing. It was only when she allowed herself to step back, to stop interpreting every look as proof of her value, that she began to feel a different kind of freedom. The freedom of knowing she could be loved without needing to prove anything. The freedom of no longer confusing attention with devotion. The freedom of realizing that her life was never meant to be a stage for someone else's validation. And when you find yourself caught in that same old pattern, when you notice your heart leaping every time he glances your way, it is not a failure. It is simply another invitation to return to yourself, to remember that you are allowed to be whole, even in the absence of anyone else's gaze, that you are allowed to rest in your own presence without needing someone else to witness it. Sometimes the most tender part of this journey is realizing that it isn't the woman you are today who is so hungry to be seen. It is the little girl you once were, the one who waited by the window or sat in the dark, hoping someone would finally look her in the eyes and say, I see you. I see all of you. And when a man's gaze lingers on you now, it can feel like an old wish being granted, a silent promise that maybe this time you will not be forgotten. But that longing, as innocent as it feels, is often the echo of a deeper wound. It is the child inside you who learned to equate being noticed with being loved, the part of you that decided long ago that attention was the only proof you existed. And even as an adult, even as a woman who has weathered heartbreak and disappointment, you might still find yourself reaching for that old reassurance. It does not make you weak, it makes you honest. Because every heart holds a younger version of itself, still waiting to be chosen. When you feel your chest tighten, when your breath shortens and your thoughts begin to spin around whether you are enough, you are not just reacting to this moment. You are reacting to every moment that came before it, every memory of being overlooked, every time you felt like you had to compete to matter, every night you went to bed wondering why love felt so far away. This is the hidden inheritance we carry, these unspoken beliefs that being loved means being approved of, that being desired means being worthy. But perhaps there is something softer waiting for you beyond this old ache, The possibility that you can be the one who offers that gaze of recognition to yourself, that you no longer have to wait for someone else to name your value before you feel it in your own bones. And when you pause long enough to listen beneath the noise of longing, you might hear a quieter truth rising to the surface, the truth that you have always been enough, even when no one was there to confirm it. When your heart begins to race and you feel yourself slipping back into the old story, that you must earn love by being beautiful enough, pleasing enough, small enough, this is the moment to breathe, to place a hand over your heart and remember that your worth did not begin the day someone finally looked at you. It was always there, unbroken and whole, waiting for you to claim it. Louise Hay's words can be a balm in this moment. I am already enough. And maybe this is what healing really is. Not the erasure of the longing, but the willingness to see it clearly and meet it with compassion. The understanding that your craving to be seen is a memory, not a verdict. That you can hold that child inside you without letting her run the show. That you can witness your own desire without letting it decide who you will become. It is a quiet kind of power that comes alive when you learn to pause before you reach for the comfort of your fantasies. There is nothing wrong with hope. Nothing wrong with dreaming of a love that feels like home. But when you have spent years weaving entire worlds out of someone's passing attention, it is worth asking yourself whether the story you are telling is one that nourishes you or one that keeps you hungry. When a man looks at you with that spark of interest, it is so easy to slip into imagining what could be, to project kindness where there is only curiosity, to build a future from a single moment of connection. Your heart wants to believe this time will be different, that this time you will be chosen without having to sacrifice any part of yourself, and perhaps it will. But the part of you that has been hurt before knows how quickly hope can become self-betrayal when you do not stay anchored in your own clarity. There is a different way to meet that gaze, a way that does not require you to abandon yourself. You can notice the warmth without needing to create a story around it. You can feel the stir of attraction without turning it into a promise. You can be curious without making it your responsibility to fill in all the missing pieces. This is what discernment feels like. Not the absence of desire, but the presence of awareness. You can witness the fire without burning your hands. You can appreciate someone's attention without deciding it must mean something about your worth. You can let a connection unfold slowly, without pouring your entire heart into it on the first day. This is not cynicism. It is self-respect. It is the quiet knowing that love does not need urgency to be real, that the right person will not require you to abandon your own wisdom to keep their interest. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to let things remain uncertain a little longer, to resist the temptation to label every feeling as fate, to trust that you will recognize what is true in time, without having to force it into clarity before it is ready. And when you find yourself wanting to slip back into the familiar comfort of imagining what this could become, you can pause, you can breathe, you can remember that you are allowed to want love without making it your entire reason for being. And maybe that is the most tender lesson of all, that you can stand in the presence of possibility without surrendering your wholeness, that you can open your heart without losing your footing, that you can desire connection and still belong completely to yourself. There is something almost magnetic in the way certain eyes can hold you, the way a look can feel like both a question and an answer all at once. And yet, even in the pull of that magnetism, you are allowed to remain anchored in yourself. You are allowed to remember that your worth does not rise and fall with someone else's desire. This is what it means to meet a gaze without losing yourself. Perhaps you have spent so many years equating intensity with sincerity that it feels unfamiliar to stay steady when attraction arises. You might feel that familiar flutter in your chest, that urge to offer more of yourself than is being asked for, as if you have to prove that you are worthy of whatever promise that look seems to hold. But what if you didn't have to do any of that? What if you could simply receive the moment without performing, without shrinking, without reaching for a version of yourself that feels more acceptable? Louise Hay's words can be a quiet reminder in this space. I am my own safe space. These are not just pretty sentences to soothe you. They are an invitation to return to the place inside that cannot be shaken by someone else's approval or indifference. When you remember this, you begin to feel how much easier it is to meet another's eyes without searching for salvation in them. You begin to trust that you can stand in the full truth of who you are, no longer needing anyone to confirm it. And maybe this is the essence of maturity, the capacity to feel attraction without letting it dissolve your boundaries, to sense potential without losing perspective, to receive attention without needing to contort yourself into whatever shape you imagine will keep it. Because the love that will sustain you is never the kind that demands your self-abandonment as proof of your devotion. When you feel that spark, when you notice your mind racing ahead to all the ways this connection could grow, you can pause. You can breathe into the spaciousness of simply allowing things to be what they are, without urgency or illusion. You can stay open without losing your center. You can welcome affection without turning it into your only source of meaning. And in that quiet steadiness, something beautiful begins to happen. You stop fearing that love will slip through your fingers if you don't grasp for it. You stop believing that you must be smaller or softer or more perfect to be worthy of staying. You start to understand that the right person will not require you to fracture yourself into pieces just to hold their gaze. And maybe, for the first time, you can feel what it means to belong to your own heart before you ever belong to someone else's. Your heart has always known what it feels like to be nourished by something real, even when you tried to convince yourself that longing alone was enough. There was still a quiet voice deep inside, whispering that you deserved more. More than momentary fascination. More than someone's partial attention. More than the restless hope that if you could only be perfect enough, you would finally be loved without conditions. And perhaps the greatest kindness you can offer yourself now is the willingness to see this clearly. That your heart is worthy of a love that does not confuse intensity with devotion, that does not disguise control as romance, that does not require you to diminish your light to make someone else feel comfortable. There is a peace that comes when you finally stop mistaking being desired for being valued, a softness that returns when you no longer need to be rescued from your own aloneness. Louise once said, "Love is everywhere, and I am loving and lovable." When you allow those words to land in the deepest part of you, something begins to shift. You start to notice that love is not something you have to chase. It is not hidden in someone else's eyes, waiting to be unlocked if you perform just right. It is already here, woven into the fabric of who you are, and the more you trust this, the less willing you become to barter your worth for the temporary thrill of being seen. Brené Brown reminds us, courage starts with showing up and letting ourselves be seen. But the truest form of courage is not in offering yourself to someone else in hopes they will complete you. It is in offering yourself to your own reflection first. In standing steady in the mirror of your own gaze, knowing that no absence, no rejection, no silence has the power to erase what has always been yours. A look can be an invitation. It can open a door. It can spark something you didn't even know was waiting to be felt. But you are the one who decides whether to walk through it. You are the one who gets to choose which eyes you allow to witness your most tender places. And you are the one who holds the final say over whether that connection is a celebration of your wholeness or a distraction from it. If this conversation has touched something in you, I hope you will carry these words into the quiet moments when doubt returns, into the mornings when you wonder if you are still worthy of the kind of love that stays, into the nights when you ache to be seen and held. You are worthy. You are already enough. And nothing, not even the most intoxicating gaze, can make you more complete than you already are. If you would like to continue this journey of healing and remembering your own worth, you can subscribe to this channel so you never miss a conversation that speaks to your heart. And if you feel ready to explore more about how to love without losing yourself, I invite you to click on the next video that is waiting for you on the screen.